Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating media narrative that's taking shape right now. We are going to unpack a recent Sky News Australia segment that takes a hard look at the highly contested Los Angeles mayoral race between Spencer Pratt and Karen Bass. Now, just to be super clear right up front, our goal today isn't to take a side. We're just here to break down exactly how this specific broadcast is framing the election. We'll look at the arguments they're making, the data they've decided to highlight, and the conclusions they're drawing. By the end of this, you'll have a crystal clear understanding of exactly how this particular media outlet views the entire situation.
Okay, let's run through the agenda really quick. We'll cover the outsider versus the incumbent, tracking the campaign funds, the grassroots AI strategy, Los Angeles court issues, and finally, the ideological voting divide. Section 1, the outsider versus the incumbent. Right off the bat, we have to look at how the commentators introduce the main characters here, because honestly, that tells you everything about the lens they're using to view the race. The broadcast sets up this incredibly stark contrast. On one hand, they position Spencer Pratt as this massive outsider who's bringing a desperately needed dose of common sense to the city. And on the flip side, well, the incumbents, Mayor Karen Bass and City Council member Nithya Raman, are heavily criticized. The segment actually goes as far as labeling the incumbents as corrupt and severely underperforming. It's basically a classic David versus Goliath framing, just with a very modern, contentious political spin. And to really hammer that framing home, the segment features a quote from a local activist who literally says, "The corrupt Karen Bass came after me. She sent her little goons after me." By leading with this kind of explosive, on-the-ground grievance, the broadcast immediately establishes a narrative. They're painting a picture of a hostile, entrenched political machine that's actively suppressing its own citizens, which perfectly sets the stage for Pratt to swoop in as the ultimate disruptor. Moving on to Section 2, tracking the campaign funds. Now, words and framing are one thing, right? But political viability usually comes down to cold, hard cash. And the sheer financial gap the broadcast points out here is just staggering. They highlight these numbers. Spencer Pratt pulling in $2.72 million compared to the sitting incumbent Mayor Karen Bass, who's only raised $283,000. I mean, in any political race, seeing an outsider outraise an incumbent by roughly 10-1 is incredibly unusual. It absolutely demands your attention. According to the segment, this massive financial discrepancy isn't just some random piece of trivia. It's an absolutely crucial metric. The commentators argue this level of fundraising indicates incredibly strong candidate performance. And here's why they say it matters so much. LA is historically a deep blue Democratic stronghold. So for a candidate who isn't running as a hardcore Democrat to pull in that kind of capital, well, the broadcast suggests that points to a massive underlying shift in voter sentiment and donor confidence. Let's dive into Section 3, the grassroots AI strategy. Okay, this is where the mechanics of this campaign take a truly wild turn. The broadcast highlights several campaign ads that keep repeating this very specific, highly calculated phrase. The quote is, "I'm not MAGA or anything, but the city's kind of gone to shit though, right?" The commentators are totally fascinated by this rhetoric. It acts as a sort of permission slip, right? It allows frustrated voters who might traditionally lean left to suddenly agree with conservative critiques of the city, all without feeling like they're betraying their own political identity. It's a really clever way to build a bridge across the aisle. But here is the real twist, and the crucial point the commentators are making. These incredibly slick, highly effective ads, they aren't even coming from Spencer Pratt's official campaign. They are completely decentralized. We're talking about AI-generated content produced entirely by a grassroots movement. It's a huge shift in modern political warfare. Passionate supporters armed with just a few AI tools are suddenly shaping the narrative just as powerfully, maybe even more powerfully, than the official campaign headquarters. The segment heaps praise on these ads for how effective they are. They point out the specific themes being hit, like complaining about needles at playgrounds, or directly comparing downtown LA to the apocalyptic TV show The Walking Dead. They also reference a real-world event where Pratt's house apparently burned down. But the Sky News hosts also single out the humor and the surprisingly highly attractive casting in these AI ads. They note how this really glossy, engaging presentation takes these gritty, dark urban realities and wraps them up into something that is just super shareable and really hard to look away from. While unpacking all this, the commentators also note how rival mainstream media is allegedly already shaping a counter-narrative. They highlight claims that the New York Times is currently preparing to blame Donald Trump's praise if Pratt ultimately loses the election. The broadcast suggests this is a preemptive tactic. Basically, ensuring that if the outsider does fail, the media can pin it on national political associations rather than admitting any flaw in his local campaign messaging. Which brings us to Section 4, Los Angeles core issues.
So, what's actually fueling this massive influx of donations and these viral grassroots AI ads? Well, the Sky News pundits argue that there's a universal consensus, even among LA residents, that the city is in deep trouble. They describe a complete disintegration of the city, driven by two huge, unchecked factors: rising crime rates and increasing homelessness. In their framing, these aren't just minor civic hurdles. They are existential threats to the quality of life in Los Angeles, threats that they claim the current administration has entirely failed to manage.
And to really hammer this point home, they go after local leaders hard. The commentators directly quote claims against officials, specifically targeting City Council member Nithya Raman. The broadcast calls her a straight-up communist and claims she actually believes public safety is overfunded. By highlighting this extreme rhetoric right after talking about a crime and homelessness crisis, the broadcast is intentionally painting a picture of an incumbent leadership that is just completely detached from the dangerous realities everyday citizens are facing. And finally, Section 5, the ideological voting divide. Okay, so if the city is facing all of these massive issues, and the outsider is out fundraising the incumbent 10-1, and the grassroots momentum is going viral, why is Karen Bass still leading the race? Well, the broadcast points out a fascinating shift in the polling. In past polls, Pratt was significantly behind both Democrats, but the current momentum shows this massive pool of undecided voters is rapidly shrinking. And the trend? The commentators note that most of those undecided voters are actually moving toward Pratt. It shows his messaging is clearly converting the middle ground. But despite all that momentum, Bass is still holding on to her lead. And the Sky News commentators have some pretty blunt theories as to why. They argue that a huge chunk of the population just chooses to ignore the crime and homelessness altogether. On top of that, they assert that many voters actually believe fighting crime is inherently racist. Ultimately, the pundits conclude that LA voters would rather stick to what they call idiotic principles. They're basically suggesting voters have this baffling willingness to accept a lower, more dangerous quality of life just so they don't have to vote against their entrenched political identity. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Looking at this through the lens of this specific media narrative, we are witnessing a fascinating political experiment in real time. Can a massively funded, highly unconventional, AI-driven grassroots campaign actually overcome those deeply entrenched ideological voting patterns in a major city like Los Angeles? It is literally unprecedented, modern campaign tactics clashing head-on with traditional voter loyalty. So what do you think is going to win out? Keep that question in the back of your mind as we watch this race and all the media coverage surrounding it continue to unfold.